chosen to reveal his will to us in a story. It's not 100 unrelated stories, but it's just one grand story of love, his love for us. And I want you to see this one story because I think you'll be struck of how far God was willing to go to get you and I back. As we read in the Bible, there seems to be two stories going on at the same time, even though in reality it's the same. We have the lower story, and then we have the upper story. The lower story is how we see the story unfolding from our perspective. The upper story is the one that God is writing. He's weaving all of these lower stories together to tell one grand story. And the secret of life is to find out the theme of God's story, where God's story is heading, and make for sure that we point our life in that direction. In the first part of the story, we see that the story of the garden, that God has a vision of creating the universe, the earth, and all the living things, and then he comes down and does life with us in the garden. That vision was lost by the first two people, Adam and Eve, and the rest of the story is God's plan of getting us back. And then we see he creates a brand new nation out of scratch called Israel. And it will be through Israel that the solution will come. And his name is Jesus. In Genesis 12, God makes an unconditional promise to Abraham, the father of this nation, that the Messiah will come from his family. And Abram has Isaac, and Isaac has 12 sons, and one of these sons will be the lineage for Jesus. So God reveals this to us when David comes. God makes an unconditional promise to David that the Messiah would come from his line, the line of Judah. No matter what humans have done in the lower story, Jesus will come from the line of Judah, the family of David. And Jesus will sit on that throne of King David. So it makes complete sense when David dies, one of his sons succeeds him on the throne. Now, David had several wives, and we won't get into that at this time, and he had several sons. And the one that God chooses to take his place wasn't his oldest son, but a son by the name of Solomon, who was born to him by Bathsheba. That's the same woman that David committed adultery with and ultimately had her husband killed. The firstborn son died as a consequence to David's sin. So you would think that God would not choose a son through Bathsheba, but he does. I think it's a reminder to us that God can take the mess that we have made in our lives, and he can turn it into something beautiful. If we will turn to him like David did, he will do the same thing for us. So God's upper story is completely intact, and it's unfolding according to God's timetable. So let us dive into the lower story here for a few minutes and look how Solomon chose to live his life and the decisions that he made. So right off the bat, young King Solomon is faced with a decision from God. We see it in 1 Kings 3, 4 through 15. It says, the king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifice, for that was the most important high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, ask for whatever you want me to give you. Solomon answered, you have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord, my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father, but I am only a child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this, so God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have you asked for the death of your enemies, but for a discerning heart to administrating justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you did not ask for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life." And Solomon woke, and he realized it had been a dream. Now, what a remarkable encounter this is. God comes to Solomon. He says, "Ask anything you want from me, and I'll give it to you." It's basically God saying, here's a blank check. Whatever you want, I'll give it. And Solomon asked for wisdom. But what is Solomon really asking for? Or what is biblical wisdom? I think here's a good definition of it. It is the skill to consistently apply common sense with a discerning spirit, learned from experience or trusted mentors, filtered through the word and will of God, leading to success in life. Wisdom is a skill. It's not just about knowing the best things to do, it's actually doing them. And wisdom is consistent. The benefits come through continuously making good decisions. It's like compounding interest. A lifetime of wise decisions produces great fruit. It's common sense that we either learn from our own life experiences or better from carefully selected mentors, people that you look up to, people that you know personally, people that you listen to or you read about. And we see a great example of Solomon's wisdom in 1 Kings chapter 3, starting with verse 16. There was 2 prostitutes that came before King Solomon. They lived in the same building, and both of them had babies just 3 days old. The first claimed that the other lady accidentally smothered her baby in the middle of the night and got up and switched the babies, and now claims the live baby is hers. So, who is Solomon to believe? I mean, he wasn't there, but he applies the wisdom that God has given him, and he orders that one man would come and that they would cut the baby in half and give each to the women, equal portions. One of the women said, "Okay," and then the other one said, "Don't kill the baby, just give it to her." And Solomon, through that, was able to identify which one was the real mother, who would rather give her baby away than see her baby harmed. He knew that a mother would do that. But biblical wisdom is more than just simple common sense, because it's filtered through the word and the will of God. What does that mean? Well, I want you to listen to this very carefully. God's way are higher than our ways. He knows how life works. He created it. He wired it a certain way. He has values and a vision that he wants us to be in tune with. His will can be found in his word. So a wise person will tether their life to his book. But there is a difference between worldly wisdom and biblical wisdom. Listen to 1 Corinthians 2, starting with verse 6. It says, "We do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, but not the wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. No, we speak of God's secret wisdom, a wisdom that has been hidden and that God destined for our glory before time began." I love the Message paraphrase of how it explains this verse. It says, "We, of course, have plenty of wisdom to pass on to you once you get your feet on firm spiritual ground. But it's not popular wisdom, the fashionable wisdom of high-priced experts that will be out of date in a year or so. God's wisdom is something mysterious that goes deep into the interior of his purpose. You don't find it lying around on the surface. It's not the latest message, but more like the oldest. What God determined as the way to bring out his best in us, long before we ever arrived on the scene. Let me give you some examples of the difference between worldly wisdom and biblical wisdom. Because Solomon says in Proverbs 3, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops, and your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. Now, let me ask you, how is giving away the first cuts, the first part of my income before I ever pay the bills, how is giving that away leave me in the end with more? I mean, it doesn't seem like that's much common sense. It doesn't seem like it makes sense at all. But the one who leans on the worldly wisdom alone discounts the God factor. That God watches over how we honor him with what he has given us. And he intervenes on our behalf. I mean, it's a spiritual wisdom that is set above conventional wisdom of the world. Even when we look throughout the New Testament with Jesus' teachings, we also see a little bit different of wisdom. Because he teaches us, if you want to be first, you must be last, and a servant of all. Now, how does that make sense? If I want to be first, I got to be last. But he's teaching us that if we want to be first in the kingdom of heaven, then we need to follow the example that Jesus has set for us to become a servant. Then he teaches us, whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. How is that? How is it that I've got to lose my life to find it? Well, this life that I have apart from Christ is already dead. You know, I'm already dead in my sins. There is no life. But if I die to him and raise again, I know that I truly have life by that point. Might not make sense worldly, but it's the biblical wisdom that we learn. Which leads to the last part of that definition. If you live this way, you put yourself in the position to experience success in life. Now let me ask, anybody interested in a little success in life? I think we all are. But keep in mind, God's success is holistic. It doesn't focus on business and finances, but rather it extends to the success in family and marriage. It includes contentment and peace. It includes success in things that matter most to God. Now, when we look at Paul's life, the Apostle Paul, I think all of us can say he had success in life. He said he knows how to have plenty and he knows how to have nothing. And he learned how to be content in any and all circumstances. But worldly, if we would have looked at him, he'd been beaten, he'd been flogged, he'd been shipwrecked, got bit by a snake. I mean, it doesn't seem like he's got much going for him. It wouldn't seem like he has success in life. But when we look at all the people he was able to touch, we know that apart from Jesus Christ, Paul furthered the message, the gospel, farther than anyone else in history. He found success in life because he focused on what truly mattered to God, and not the success that our world would tell us. Because think about it, you don't want financial or business success at all costs. I mean, I've seen tons of people who are super successful financially and their lives are just a wreck. I mean, people may say, I'd rather be rich and miserable than poor and miserable. But think about it, neither of those options are good. God calls his people to set their sights on something higher, complete success in our life. Keep in mind, there is a condition to it. God told Solomon this would all work out as long as he walked in his will. And he did it the first part of his life. But then he got off track. First, he kept adding wives. In 1 Kings 11:3, we learn that he had 700 wives and 300 concubines, which was essentially legal mistresses. That's way too many. That's about 999 too many. But it's not the real problem. Because from a human perspective, from a worldly perspective, it seemed to be wise because Solomon was forming political alliances with other nations. If he would marry another king's daughter, then he could secure some favors from them. I mean, from a worldly perspective, it seemed wise. But from a biblical perspective, it was wrong. Because the foreign women worshipped other gods. They eventually talked Solomon into building temples for them and allowing them to worship them, which violates the first commandment of God, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. God warned him of this very thing personally. When it comes to biblical wisdom, his decision was foolish. And as we will see next week, it ended up dividing the nation. But there's one more thing that I want you to know. This brand of wisdom is something you must ask God for. It doesn't come automatically. Solomon asked for it, and God gave it. And it served him very well in all aspects of his life. And the same invitation is for us. Because in James 1:5 it says, if any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. So ask God for wisdom to make the right decisions in your life. But if you're going to ask him for it, you have to be able to commit to him. Because the next few verses says, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. Because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. So do you want stability in your life? To be able to face whatever comes your way? And ask God for wisdom. Because when we look at the life of Solomon, the title of this sermon is The King Who Had It All. And he did. He had it all. He had wealth. He had prestige. He had wisdom. But he lost sight on what truly mattered. And all of the wisdom that he had and the book of Proverbs that he wrote, he ended up doing some of the things that he talked should never be done. He lost sight on what truly mattered. And biblical wisdom will also teach us that I can't save myself. That I can't earn my salvation. That I am a sinner in need of a Savior. And there's only one who can truly save me. And he came, he gave his life for me, for you, so that we can have hope. So that we can find that biblical wisdom, so that we could have true success in life. If that's something you're looking for, come now as we stand and sing.